Some funding is provided by John A. Cook, Certified Public Accountant at 105 East Main Street in Westfield.
The Chautauqua Integrated Delivery System. Our community of doctors is pleased to announce their affiliation with Senior Choice. Senior Choice fills in where your Medicare coverage leaves off.
Fairpoint Communications, formerly C&E Telephone, providing telephone, internet, and data services, is proud to fund this broadcast of Senior Report.
Some funding is provided by State Senator Catherine M. Young.
Absolute Care of Westfield, committed to returning the favor to those who have spent a lifetime caring for others. Located on 26 Cass Street in Westfield, New York.
Some funding is provided by the Lakeview Hotel and Restaurant, located on Water Street near the lake in Mayville.
Live from the Chuck Kelsey Television Studio at Access Channel 5 in Mayville, it's Senior Report with Reed Powers. Call in and participate in Chautauqua County's only live call-in senior program. Share a thought or wish someone a happy birthday. Saturday mornings between 9 and 10 a.m. And now, here's Reed Powers. Well, good morning, ladies and gentlemen. As you can see, I'm not Reed Powers, I'm Randy Burt. Reed is back on his double cruise. He does twice a year, and I am going to host today. And I'd like to welcome you today to Senior Report. It's Labor Day weekend, and the weather sounds like it's going to be fantastic. So this is the weekend. You guys got to get out now and enjoy the last big bang of summer. I got two guests today. We're going to have a real interesting show. We're going to talk about something that I work with, and we mention it on the show quite often, and I finally got two guests in that are really going to let you know about it. The Bemus Point Stow Ferry. And today with me, I have John Cheney and Art Thomas, and they are going to discuss the history of the ferry and from the beginning right up till now and the future. So we hope you'll enjoy the show. And today, I'm going to open the phones right up. You can call in anytime at 753-5225 or 753-JACK. So we're going to start right off now and welcome the two gentlemen. So good morning, John. Good morning, Art.
Good morning.
Good morning, Art.
Good morning.
Now, John Cheney is, I'm going to describe John as my partner in crime. John and me got to know John really good back in 2003, and we've been together doing all kinds of craziness ever since. And John's the director of ferry operations and keeps this ferry up and running along with his fantastic, beautiful wife, Betty Lou. Don't hit me. No.
Oh,
No.
she just keeps me going.
She keeps John going. Somebody's got to have that whip out there and get you up mornings.
Yep.
So, John, I'm going to start with you right now. When did you start with the Bemus Point Stow Ferry originally? I know you've been in and out of it for...
Too many years ago. I figure I played with it for over 40 years off and on.
Oh, my gosh.
And rode it, of course, over the years. mostly as a necessity, save 28 miles going around. Started out literally when my first experience on the ferry is proved very interesting because I went over to Clayton White's, had a dairy farm across at Stow there, and had Guernsey cattle, and that was my project, Guernsey calf, and I went over to get it, and naturally we rode the ferry over and brought it back. And I didn't think anybody could hold that calf but me, and I discovered I couldn't do that about a quarter of the way across the lake because the calf decided to swim back home. And that was my introduction, first remembrance of the ferry, because the calf got away, so I went after the calf and we swam ashore. At that time it was up in the swamp. It took them about 3 hours to come and get me out of that swamp. It was the darndest place I was ever in. And that's my first experience on the ferry.
How about you, Art? Your first experience with the ferry?
Well, I've been coming out here from Cleveland since 1942, but my first memorable experience with the ferry was in 1951. I started working for Marlin Rockwell, and some of the boys in Bemus Point had a carpool, and I decided I'd join this carpool. So I called the county and I found that the ferry operates as part of the highway system. Therefore, from 6 o'clock until midnight, I guess, they had to take whoever came along across that ferry. So the first morning with the carpool, I was walking, and I walked down to the ferry and told the ferry boat operator that I was to be taken across for a nickel in those days. And he very indignantly told me he wasn't going to take me across for a nickel. He said he had people come down with a single car and he made them wait for another car. And I said, well, according to your superiors, you're supposed to take me across because this is part of the highway system. So he made a phone call and found out I was right, and he very begrudgingly took me across. And I stood on the front of the ferry watching Bemus Point approach, and I felt like Columbus discovering a new world. That didn't last too long because the ferry had problems, and I'd find myself stranded in Bemus Point, and people would have to run me around the lake to get me home. So we abandoned that within maybe 2 weeks.
I know that getting stranded there, that's one of our running the ferry. We got to make sure everybody gets back. There's no way to get back without walking it. What, 20,
if you're a
28
pedestrian,
miles?
you got a problem.
There's a bridge there, but you're not allowed on that bridge.
Well, the ferry itself is very historical. It meant a lot, as I stated before, that saved 28 miles going, and you figure what it was. One of the interesting things was that I find that changed during the war. One of the things that happened that they tried to keep the ferry going all winter by salting the lake, was told, but that didn't prove out because the splash of the ferry built up ice on it, and that made it heavier, and there was all kinds of problems.
All they did was they got it stuck in the middle of the lake, and they had to get a big tow truck and a cable to pull it back to Stow.
There's some really interesting things, and Art, he knows, and I compliment him highly for the work he's put onto it. He's writing a book about the ferry, and I'm sure it'll be very interesting.
Well,
and look forward to it, Art.
It's more like I'm accumulating stuff about the ferry.
There was literally 2 ferries at one time. They run one down between Celeron and Bittersweet, I believe that's one.
Well, there were 2 ferries at Stow, at Bemus Point and Stow at one time, 1924. Alton Ball had built a new ferry down in Jamestown, and he ran it up to the Narrows in 23, but they couldn't run it that year because the water was too high. So the next spring, they somehow figured up a system